Hello, Bermuda, and welcome back to Nurturing Our Nation Imperfect Parenting series for our fifth panel discussion. Today, we are going to have another impactful panel that will be discussing personal care and wellness, which are extremely big deals for parents and children. So far, we have discussed routines, setting boundaries, some of the effects of bullying and domestic violence on children, co parenting and nurturing parents, and then today we'll be discussing personal care and wellness. So if you haven't seen our previous episodes, you can go back and view them. They are on our social media channels. Or if you search Nurturing Our Nation Imperfect Parenting series on gov.bm, you can watch them there as well. So, all of the parents, guardians, family, and friends in the community, please feel free to ask questions or leave comments. We will try to address as many as we can live. If we don't have the opportunity, you can feel free to email them to us at askus@gov.bm. Also, share this series with anyone that you know can benefit from it. It does take a village, so be sure to share the resources when we can. At this time, I would like to welcome the Minister of Social Development and Seniors, the Honorable Tene Fabric, to give us some opening remarks.
Thank you, Alicia. Good afternoon, Bermuda. Thank you for joining us today for another panel discussion. We have been going at this for a couple of months now, and we have two more presentations that we will actually have live. But you can go back at any time to go and watch the information that is shared. So just last week, Thursday, November 10th, we had the first annual Nurturing Our Nation in Perfect Parenting Series Parenting Expo. We had over 30 organizations join us on the front lawn of City Hall to highlight all of the amazing resources that are available for children and families in Bermuda. So that was a 30 strong of representation. However, that we have much more of that representing children and families in Bermuda, but we just want to thank those organizations that did join us on the lawn of City Hall last week, Thursday. The energy was high. Children and parents were engaged in conversation, making connections, and we even had a performance by In Motion Dance School of Dance. And we would like to thank everyone who made this expo a success, and we can't wait next year for the one that we will have. Alicia highlighted today, we'll be discussing personal care and wellness, which is so important to the overall well-being of families. Now that we have our panel discussion here with us today, our panelists with us today, they will share a powerful um, resources for us to help our families to fill their cups so that they can pour back into their loved ones. Our November parenting tip of the month is to enhance your positive parenting skills by reading a parenting article or book, visiting an online parenting resource, listening to a parenting podcast, or asking your families and friends. I encourage everyone to not only tune in today's discussions, but to have a look at our previous panel discussions as there have been some truly powerful tools shared. Without further ado, I want to introduce our amazing panelists who provide realistic, actionable tips for parents and caregivers. So today we are joined by Dr. Zena Zul, who's a clinical supervisor at the Department of Child and Family Services. We also have Shadrina Hassel, clinical social worker at the Department of Child and Family Services. Dela Burgess, mental health professional at TeleConnect, and also Miss Judith Brooks, family clinician at Beyond Therapy. Welcome, everyone, today.
Hello, hello, and welcome to all. Let's get right into our questions. So, being that the topic today is personal care and wellness, we're going to touch on how important is self care for parents.
Self care is very important to parents. Um, I think parents need exactly what we're providing today, a little insight and a little more education to understand the nature of self care, because self care is about our health, the health physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, um, lifestyle. And today, hopefully, we can shed more light to give them their own working definition of self care.
Okay. Taylor, did you have anything you wanted to share?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, Bermuda. I would like to just agree with Ms. Brooks and what she just shared. In this climate, the social climate in Bermuda, after what everyone has experienced, what we're currently going through, I think self care is a non negotiable. I mean, at
Yes.
this point, it is something that should be built into everyone's routine. And I think it's even more critical for parents at this point because parents, I'm not a parent yet, but parents wear so many hats and they're taking care of so many people and they have so many schedules outside of their own. And so if parents aren't actually taking the time to schedule some self care at any point in their day, for me, I like to get it done right in the beginning of the day because that's that first bit of morning energy can be reserved for you before you get into anyone else's schedule. So I think it's really critical, and I think um, everyone's self-care routine should look different. Wellness is defined different for everyone. It doesn't have to be anything extraordinary, expensive, over the top. It can be something simple, simple. 30 minutes of your day, doing an inventory with yourself, checking in, journaling, getting your mind right before you go and deal with partners and children and work. It's a critical piece of anyone's journey at this point. It's necessary.
So you touched on some of the ways that parents can incorporate self care. Did you want to elaborate on any of them?
I
Because
really
you
like to
touched
keep
on
it
it.
simple.
Yeah.
I think especially in this climate again, we don't really have the everyone doesn't have the resources to go above and beyond. So for me, keeping it simple looks like moving my body at least 3 to 4 times a day, getting those natural endorphins released. Working out kind of sets the tone for your day. It allows you to, it helps with your mood, it helps with your focus, it helps with clarity. Another piece that I like to do is just incorporate a form of spirituality in the first part of my day. So not only do I work out, and these are simple things too, right? Like I do a check in with myself, I pray, I meditate, right? I pray for those people around me. And that helps me to get right before I can go into work, before I can deal with all the other people that I have responsibility and obligation to. And like I said, we have been through a rough couple of years. And so it's not a question, it's not a negotiation, like it's critical. Like we have to be able to parents have to be able to tap in with themselves and know where they're at so that we can raise healthy young people. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's good that you touched on that it doesn't have to be overly complicated or expensive. Because I know a lot of time, people think that self care might look like a vacation or going to the massage parlor or doing different things that cost retail therapy. But some of those free ways that you touched on are equally as impactful. Shadrina, did you have something that you wanted to share?
Yeah, sure. For me, I like to think of self care as a personal investment.
Mm-hmm.
We as people tend to invest in others, and especially parents when they're doing so much for children and spouses and even their parents. And so I like to think of self care as an investment in self. And like Ms. Barger stated that, it is a necessity. I know from my personal experience, I used to hear that self care was a luxury. Like, it's not anything that was required, but it shouldn't be a luxury. It should be something that's a part of your day to day. And as Ms. Barger stated, even in small ways, sometimes sitting there and having a cup of tea, just taking that time, just focusing on that moment, having that sip of tea, taking in the scents and the smells and just being in that moment, that can be a way of taking care of self. The movement, listening to music, that is very helpful in terms of reducing stress, right? Studies have proven that many times. So I think there's little ways that we can do it. And I think for this panel discussion, I think there's little tidbits are really beneficial because a lot of times people think it has to be so great, these self care practices. But I think there's smaller things that are actually very beneficial for our day to day parents.
Especially as parents at work, trying to incorporate that into the day. So I like how you said, a cup of tea. I have a cup of tea here now because in the mornings it's like drop off, get ready, kind of chaotic, and then you get into the office. And most of us are here majority of the day. So doing stuff like you said, like maybe meditating at your desk or putting on a relaxing playlist,
Mhm.
maybe turning your lights down low and different ways that
Yep.
You don't feel like you have to have a babysitter to do these
Yes.
things, right? And it's little bits each day. Miss Brooks, it looking like you have something to add.
Um,
Yes, I do. Because, you know, when Dana referred to the simple things, do you know you can be practicing self-care by practicing mindfulness, and that is to stay focused on the single task at hand.
mhm,
And for mothers with busy schedules going in several directions, and like Dana suggested, they are the keeper of many schedules, not just their own. So just getting in the practice of being single-minded in a task. Just slow yourself down, focus on the task. What do I need for this task? How can I complete this task? Stay focused on one thing at a time. I know people believe multitasking works.
mhm, mhm. It's
I
true.
will leave that alone and encourage parents to be single tasking.
Mhm,
You will use less energy.
mhm, mhm,
A lot of energy when you're three and four things at once.
mhm,
Single task, you manage it. It's bite size. It's good.
mhm, mhm,
It's achievable.
mhm. I definitely agree with that. I'm like Dayla. I like that Dayla. I'm very simple too. Like when I was actually preparing for this, I do bullet points. I work with Shay, so Shay does. I'm like I'm doing bullet points because I'm also a parent. And as I was thinking about this, I'm also one who likes affirmations. I will see something and read it, and it really encourages me. So I was telling Shay, I was looking at something, and this lady wrote, "Self care means giving yourself permission to pause." And I just thought that was powerful
Amen.
because I think COVID and everything, we don't like to pause. We're always moving. So
Like we're
as we
getting this out on
pause,
something.
yeah, it's like, but I also was telling Shay, because we talked about it, that I also want to talk about some other selves that parents don't do. We talk about self care, but we don't talk about self love. We don't talk about self forgiveness.
Mhm,
And we don't talk about
mhm.
self reflecting.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
and and for me, that's me. I just sit back and say, and it's not selfish.
It's not selfish.
And I think that's what sometimes we have to remember. So that's my take on it when I think of self care. I love what Joel said because it is, as Shay said, a personal interest, and we have to really take it that it's okay.
Yeah.
Prioritize that time. But what the saying is, you can't pour from an empty cup. So having to pour in so that you can pour out. Ms. Brooks touched on mindfulness. Could did anyone want to elaborate about mindfulness and how it can benefit personal care?
I think it's I think mindfulness is just a big word for bringing attention to the present moment. And like Miss Brooks and Miss Hassel just said, it's like just taking the time to be present with sipping your coffee in the morning and your tea, smelling the aromas, like, listening to what's actually going on outside. First thing in the morning or late at night, we hear, the tree frogs or the birds chirping in the morning. So, and I know parents, right, this can be like a lot because you probably have your children as audio in the background too, first thing in the morning.
They try to wake up early. They try
But
to wake up
yeah,
early.
and maybe it's actually get into bed on time so you can get up a couple of minutes early so that you have that quiet morning period to yourself. And it's just that investment, like Miss Hassel said, like get into bed early so that I can be up early before the rest of my house is up. And it's really just bringing attention and being present in the moment with whatever is actually going on. It can be in your car. I know you sometimes we hop in our car and we're to the destination. We don't even remember the route that we took because we're on autopilot. It's just getting from point A to point B in a safe way. So I really think people would be amazed by how much you can actually achieve with intention and awareness in each moment that even with parenting, I think mindfulness is even more important with parenting. I'm not a parent, but I have a niece and a nephew, and my niece is 2. And so she's in this state where parents know where she's like pushing the boundary. She's like, okay,
Yeah,
how
that's
much can I
agree.
actually get away with in
Busy.
this moment? Like even with auntie, And like what I noticed the other day for myself is like, okay, how like I'm feeling like she's bringing something out of me right now. But if we're paying attention to what's happening even emotionally, like with our internal states with children when we're parenting, right, it makes a whole lot of a difference, because kids need safe places. And if we're not mindful of how we're feeling when we're parenting, when we're interacting with them, I think we can do a lot of things that sometimes we want to reverse later. So mindfulness can be brought to moment, but also watching your emotional states and the stress levels and your thinking and your feelings when you're interacting with little people, because they will do that. Like I said, my niece is pushing the envelope already. She's only two. And it becomes, and they do it over and over as they develop and get older. So mindfulness is important at any state and any phase that you're in, especially for parents.
I
Mindfulness also, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Regina.
Okay. I was gonna say, from what I've heard Miss Burgess speak of, two words that come to mind for myself is intentional, being intentional, and being present. Right. So mindfulness is being intentional and being present. And once you do those things, I think it brings more self awareness. So as Ms. Burgess was saying, like being able to understand what your triggers are and what ways you're responding. Because once we develop that self awareness, we can then create change in our behaviors and how we respond to children, right? As Ms. Burgess, well, I don't have children myself, so that's a similarity. But as to give a helpful feedback, I think that it is important for us to be aware of our behaviors, because as we know, children learn from what they see, right? We can tell them not to do, but they're going to do what they see. And so I think being that positive role model and being able to model healthy behavior and that self-regulation piece, that control piece.
I guess I find it very interesting when I think of mindfulness in the sense of, especially with children, since I work with a lot of children and adolescents, one of the things I always tell parents to be aware of, that children absorb what we give out, especially energy. And I'm into this feeling that energy. Like I think Miss Brooks brought it up earlier. Like you just feel that presence in a room, and I think we forget that children feel that. And a lot of times we will say, "Oh, they didn't hear that," and it's like, no, they actually did. If they didn't hear it, they absorbed it some way, somehow. It amazes me how many kids will come in and say, I feel like this because I saw mommy do this, but they can't put the word to it, but they know it. Their mother say it. So I think with mindfulness, for me also is teaching kids different ways of how to do mindfulness. So for myself, I do this too. I love yoga. It's just something about it that just makes it in tune with your body, in tune with your mind, in tune with your environment. And studies have showed that a lot of schools have done that with kids, like just like giving them a space where they can just, as Shay always we say, ground yourself, because sometimes you need to be grounded. So I definitely think mindfulness has its purpose for parents and for children. And it's sometimes you could do it together. I think with parents we get kind of too serious sometimes and we forget we were children. And I think children teach me well, like being silly, laughing. We don't do these things no more. I don't know why when we become adults, we just act like we can't be silly. We get so serious. But children, I love children because they make, I mean, I'm seeing them walking my office and I'm saying, you need to lighten up.
Yeah, for real.
And I'm like,
Because
oh,
they're not carrying the weight of the world.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Zena, I agree because it's like spontaneousness just doesn't seem to occur as often, right? With
Yeah.
adults.
We
You
have our
might get some
jobs, our
games, you might get some
routines.
explosives, but with children, there's a lot of spontaneity. And the thing about mindfulness also, I just want the listening audience to um, I want to give us an application so that those who are struggling to just bring the idea of mindfulness into a focus for themselves. You know, if there's something that you want to improve on, say there's a task that you find yourself struggling with, and not a big task, it could be a small task. I know when I'm on my laptop, I have to constantly remind myself where to close out. I had to come out and go back in. And so I recognized that I had to bring some mindfulness to that simple act. Focus. You're getting ready to close. What are you closing out? What do you need to leave open? And what do you need to de stress yourself about in this process? Right? But just taking a task, breaking it down so that you're single mindedly, like just fulfilling the goal of the moment. And it can be a simple goal. So if you want to start developing mindfulness in your practice of everyday life, start with those tasks that you feel, I just need to master this a little better. And all it requires is just intentionality, as Shadrina said, focus, right? And actually, step one, step two, step three, I'm finished. I'm happy. I didn't have to come back out and relog on because I stopped thinking about the million things I was trying to research and just focused on the simple thing at hand. Close this page.
Like, mm-hmm.
That is helpful. And as a parent of three, I know that sometimes finding time seems like a lot. So what I do personally is I have 5 million alarms set, but like one of my alarms is like breathe. So literally, I can just remember to just like, okay, like it's all right. Maybe just like step back. And I have one that's like tells me to walk around the block, or drink some water, have a cup of tea, because as simple as those things are, when you're in work, you can just look down and you look up at it's 3 o'clock, you haven't ate anything, you haven't moved from your desk. Now you got a PTA meeting, your child's got homework and got to cook dinner. And it all just kind of seems back to back. So like we have smartphones. This could be a very real way to even build some of that mindfulness. So now I want to ask another question. We talk a lot about self care for parents and the importance of that. Would you say that self care is equally as important for children?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And at what age should parents start to try to incorporate and introduce discussions of self care with their children?
Well, Alicia, let me tell you, I did some, I actually did some homework, right? I said, okay, don't play with what you know, go refresh. And I did some homework and I made a discovery. Um, Montessori,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
montykids.com, montykids.com. They have a self-care um, station that they introduce to parents to start teaching their children, toddlers,
Mm-hmm.
toddlers, self-care.
Mm-hmm.
The way they started, the way they introduced it is, i.e., like in the bathroom where we have everything set for adult size. If you have the space, have a mirror at the toddler's height and possibly have their toothbrush there, their soap there, or whatever can work, and sanitizer. But it has a lot of examples, and I was really impressed. And I was sorry that I didn't know about that all these years, because it would help me tremendously to help.
What was the website? I want to put it up on the screen.
It's Montessori, right? But it's Monty, Monti, kids.com.
Makes sense. Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad I stumbled on it. I was telling it to everybody now.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer a secret.
So there it is.
Mm-hmm.
Did we spell it wrong? I think we spelled it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
There we go.
Montekids.com. Okay. And like the minister said, the November tip is to enhance your positive parenting skills by looking up different resources and articles. So thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so essentially, we would say from the beginning of life is when we should start to implement self care in our children's routines. Um, so maybe what are some ways that parents can include self care into family time in the routine?
One thing that I can
Yeah.
think about is, in Bermuda, we do have a lot of people who provide services. They do mommy and me yoga. You have organizations such as Camp Bermuda, probably Solstice, and other institutions that allow, family therapy that provide art-based therapies. that you can do as a family. But even smaller than that, I mean, to incorporate self care in family time. I think one thing, even when you were speaking earlier, was about routine. I think routine is actually very key because in having a routine, you can implement those times and probably schedule some family times. But we can do things such as taking walks together, cooking dinner together, listening to music together, having little dance parties. Children love dance parties and dressing up and being silly and playing. Going outside and just running on the grass with them without shoes because that helps with grounding as well. So if you're in the grass and your feet are connected to the ground, just playing with plants, feeling nature, so many things that families can do, whether it's, on the monetary end, which with seeking out therapeutic resources or the other end of just it being free and utilized. In the summer we go to the beach, we have family days, right? So we live in a country that's beautiful. Nature is therapeutic on its own. And we parents can probably utilize that a little bit more because it's right at their fingertips when they have the time to.
I agree with Ms. Shadrina. I once had a job where I had to do assessments, and it was very interesting, especially in Bermuda, where people always buying toys and a lot of things like parents think they have to spend. And I remember in my job, I used to tell the kids, "You'll go in the home." I used to go in the home, and then I'll have to assess. And what was interesting, children never went and got their toys. They went in the cabinet and brought out your pots, and then they'll get a wooden spoon, and then they'll start drumming. Now, I used to say to the parent, that's the cheapest way you could teach a child how to learn gross motor skills, fine motor skills. So I think a lot of times parents need to realize it doesn't have to be monetary. A lot of times I think we get pressured by this community and society of what we think is right for parents to do. And a lot of times parents like, it's in your backyard, it's in your house. I think a lot of times, and then it helps our children to realize one thing that I think that we don't teach sometimes about self-care too. And Ms. Brooks said it earlier. I love how she did it, the spiritual, all the different areas. But we don't teach children also around finances. There's a way of teaching self-care around finances. And I think that's what when we are teaching children that you don't have to have the latest this, but I'm going to teach you this. That's a way of self-care too. And I think a lot of times we don't think about that. We just think, and we have to nowadays because it's so much commercialism out there
Yeah.
and
So 24/7.
immediately instead of saying we could just do this. I mean, I'm gonna date myself out there. I knew about secondhand. That's all I'm going to say. Secondhand was, hey, it was helpful.
Especially for children, and they're gonna go and play. And I know that we live in a very technological world, but sometimes, like you said, keeping it simple and showing them that you don't have to do a lot, and bringing it in so that they don't have to get to a point where they feel burnt out or like developing those ideas that self-care is selfish. It's like the earlier you introduce it, the stronger their boundaries are gonna be to say, hey, this is my non-negotiable. I personally, for my children, we do like the morning and evening kind of like mood checks. So it's like, okay, well, what type of mood you're in, so I can know how to proceed, and then also letting them know what type of mood I'm in. My middle son is a talker, so sometimes I feel like I don't have the capacity for it. So it's like, hey, could we play a quiet game, like spot out different birds or spot out different things, so it gives those pauses. But like you said, it doesn't have to be expensive. It can be simple. So yeah, I think that is good for parents that might co-parent. I know last time you touched on co-parents and nurturing parents, but would you say that it's important for parents to take time to themselves or for themselves when they don't have their children? Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
And how do parents, or even if the in a relationship or co-parents, and they're trying to take a moment for themselves, it's a lot of guilt sometimes around it. So, what would you say for parents to overcome some of the guilt that they might feel about self-care?
Co-parenting and self-care. I actually worked a lot around co-parenting. But one of the things I would like to invite those that are listening who are co-parenting to consider is having a plan. The same way you made a plan for pickup time and what clothes to have organized and packed. Have a plan for yourself. If by Wednesday and your child will be home on Friday, you recognize that you're running low. That's not the time to do high activity self care. That's actually the time to slow down, be reflective, like Zena suggested, or one of us suggested, to be reflective and not necessarily take full on inventory, but maybe it's really time not to clean out that closet, but schedule a nap.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Schedule a nap. Plan your weekend differently. Instead of sleeping late, get up the regular time, even if you're not cleaning and all of those things, so that you can lay down and take a nap. And if sleep is not coming, the time that you use to get quiet will serve you well. And if
Mm-hmm.
you're reading a book, get a quiet something on the quiet, reflective side. Music, quiet on the reflective side. In other words, I'm recommending that you re-energize yourself because the hardest thing about co-parenting is when the child comes back and you take 2 days to get the schedule back on track.
Mm-hmm.
So planning a high gear weekend when you know that's still an uphill battle may not be the wisest thing to do. Now, for some people, all that high energy is the only thing they want to do. I get it. I really get it. But recognize that Sunday will come and you have to give your child what they need, right? And they need consistency. So if you're in a high energy mood and you're not ready to calm down yourself and come back down to baseline, right? You are not ready for your child. So it is a balancing act. No two ways about it. It is a balancing act. I'm just pointing out those weekends that are coming, and you know by Wednesday, look, I'm really beat. Take care of yourself like you're really understanding what your needs are. Don't put your needs out the way because your child's not there. You have a high energy weekend, and come Sunday, you're paying for it heavily. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Okay, that might have sounded, I don't
No,
know.
it's all about balance. We need this. We need the wisdom
Yes.
to be sure. Taylor, I think yes, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Yeah, I think what Ms. Brooks just shared is excellent. It's spot on. I also want to take from my what I believe Dr. Zool shared, giving yourself permission to actually tap into what you need, right? And before you had children, you were your own individual. Before you became a parent, like a parent's a big part of someone's self and identity and a part of their knownness and self, but you're also your own individual, and you have to be able to understand who that is and understand how your needs change through the phases of your life. And so it's really giving yourself the permission to say, like, I need to have my needs met too, because
Yes.
I'm not just a parent. I'm an individual. I'm a being. So and tapping into like what that guilt is about too, like asking yourself the very difficult question, like, why do I feel guilty about taking care of myself while my children or my child are being are with the other parent or the other family, um, and get into what that's about for you. But you belong to you before you belong to anyone else. That's my favorite thing to say. So yeah, you have to give yourself permission to meet your needs for sure, and identify what your needs are, because your needs are going to look different, or that they're gonna change. They'll develop, and your desires will change too. So I think that that's really important.
Yeah. And even to expand on Miss Brooks' statement in terms of practicing the coping skills when the child is out of the home, having that reading time, that downtime, and doing what you need for yourself, I think is instrumental because when your child does return home, obviously you have a lot more tasks on hand, which can create stress for you as the parent. And so when you are practicing these coping skills, when the child is out of the home, once that time comes of high stress moment, you're able to pick up on the skills that you've developed further to help you with that stress, to help you monitor your reactions, that anger or frustration, or feeling depressed that moment, right? So practicing those skill sets while while your children are out of the home are very beneficial for when they return.
Comes down to modeling. I think for
Mm-hmm.
a lot of us, that's the thing. I think we say, "Don't do what I." What's the saying? They say, "Don't see what I do, but don't do what I do."
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times people don't realize it's the other way around. Actually, I'm modeling what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So it is good to practice. And I think a lot of times parents beat up on themselves. And I want the audience to understand this. We beat up on ourselves because we know that I don't think parents wake up in the morning and say, I want to be this type of parent
Mm-hmm.
or I want to do this to my child. I think most parents know what they want for their children, what they want to aspire for their children.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we gotta give parents slack. Because I think we
Yeah.
judge sometimes that we think what we know what parents are doing. And many parents, I notice a lot of parents come in, they have their own answers.
Mm-hmm.
They just need guidance on how to get there. And
Mm.
a lot of guys are saying practice is one of the ways you get guidance because
Mhm.
you can speak it, but if you're not putting it in practice, it can be very hard. So I just encourage the parents out there, practice and be okay to make a mistake because we don't like to do that either.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
make a mistake. That's why I said be silly and laugh at yourself because it's helpful. It's
Yeah.
actually a mindfulness thing
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
laugh at yourself and just say, wow, I am really silly. I can't believe I did that. So I think we just need to give parents like Dale said permission to be okay, and it's okay to be not okay.
Mhm.
And
Mm-hmm.
in practice, you learn what works for you. You learn more about yourself. You gain more awareness.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's really great for practice when parents have the time to. And I know time is hard because
Yes.
they're out here working, grinding, trying to provide,
Yes.
almost in, and I would call it survival mode, right? With the um, COVID, with the cost of living, with the expectations of parents. There's a lot of single parent households. There are grandparents who are parents to grandchildren. There's a lot that's happening within our environment. And so,
And our community.
like Dr. Z said, giving themselves permission to make mistakes,
Mhm.
having exploratory moments to learn who they are, what their needs are, how their needs can best be met. And if they're having difficulty doing that on their own, really knowing that it's okay to ask for help and seek support. Because I think that sometimes parents think that if they do ask for help, it's a sign of weakness or it's a
Yeah.
question of their parenting abilities, and that's not it. Everybody needs support.
Yes.
It's that famous saying that there takes a village to raise a child. We need help. Parents need help, right? In many ways. So if it's asking for help emotionally, asking for help with someone picking up the children, asking for help just so you can have that time to regroup, it's okay to ask for help.
And
Yeah.
I'm glad that you touched on it takes a village to raise a child because it really does. And some parents they might not have any like biological, like they might have parents that are transitioned. How would you say that parents can go about building a village? Or even like what is the importance, I guess, of asking and being okay to be open and say like, hey, I do need someone to maybe pick up my child, or can you help me with washing a load of clothes, or something as like simple things like that. I think that we overlook. But how would you say for maybe that's somebody that doesn't have a village, how could they go about getting some support? I know we had the parenting aspect. I wish everybody was here right now, but if you know of any resources that are out there, please share.
I,
And
I encourage parents to, in the first session I have with parents, I do an assessment on who helps them, and it's geared for looking at who helps them.
Mm.
I'm going to tell you, I felt like crying sometimes when I have 8 circles and only 2 have entries, and one of them is themselves and their children, right?
Yeah.
And that's in my practice, that's a real thing. It's
Yeah.
reality, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to spend the time, the client and I, looking at understanding why is that so? Has there been some isolating? Has there been some fragmentation in their relationships? Are we needing to do some forgiveness work? Are we needing to do, good question. The answer for me is not straightforward, but I definitely am saying I assess seriously for it. Just like I assess seriously for depression, I assess who helps them and how to resolve that they can put a village around themselves.
Yeah.
And sometimes in the process, may take month 3 that they're more open for me to revisit and to help them with that. And when they leave me, they recognize, whoa, I got a lot of support. I didn't understand it. Yes, you did have a lot of support.
Mhm.
Mhm. For various people, various reasons,
Mhm.
um, find ourselves, themselves like that. I
Yeah.
said because I know I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with Miss Brooks, Judy, because I think a lot of times we forget that we assume that people do have support systems, and when we assess, we have to do both things. I've seen it on both ends, like you said. Sometimes people don't have support, but I've seen it the other way, where people have too much support, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Sometimes it's not always healthy support. It
Yeah.
could be people that you thought were going to be there and have your back, but they're not. And we have to sometimes help you to see how are these people impacting you. Um, and I agree. Lisa asked a good question. Sometimes, and I'm a community. I have this thing about community. I really do. And what bothers me sometimes is I used to tell people, please stop walking on the street and asking people how they feel,
Yeah.
unless you really want to know how they feel.
Yeah.
And I say that, but sometimes it's what Shay said earlier. You've got to be intentional. You've got to want to have relationships with people who are different from you, may have different circumstances from you, but you got to come out of your comfort zone. Because we
Mm.
all have comfort zones. We know, and parents feel the same way. I may have a comfort zone because I created it or somebody created it for me. I could live in a certain neighborhood and you think I don't deserve to have this or this. Like we have all these perceptions is the word I want to say. And a lot of times we have to accept that maybe our perceptions are wrong and then look at it. So I really do feel like serving is what we should do.
Yeah.
Serving and
Mhm.
gratitude. But I think sometimes it's hard for parents to feel like that because we have our own narrative in our head what we might think and what we might think others think of us. So
Yes.
it's not an easy answer. It really isn't. But I feel like
It's
each
not.
one of us
Yeah.
should take the responsibility we can with what we have. So if we can help someone, help them. If we can't, find someone who can, because this is a small community. So I'm just coming from a community perspective
No,
of how.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think for me, from what I've seen, is that some parents have the traditional support of having their family and friends to be those persons that they go to. Sometimes support comes from this child's teachers. I've seen that where the teachers take on more of a role of support to help the parents. Sometimes in our job, we are the only support. Parents will
That's
identify us
right.
as support. And so it is a difficult question because for everyone, that support looks different. But for those persons who do not have this support, I think Ms. Brooks asks a good question. Why is that? And how can we change that? Is there a way that we can change that? Because I think support is so needed. We're social beings. To be in isolation is not healthy for us. And so to be able to develop those relationships with people, I think is ideal. And to have that support would be so beneficial, not only to the parent, but to the children. And so I think it's a difficult question because it can look so different.
Yeah.
I
I
think it's
Still
think
a good question. Just difficult.
Yes.
it's a good question.
yeah.
It's a really good question.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think just drawing from what everyone has said, especially what Ms. Hassel just shared, we are social beings. And I think a lot of the suffering that we go through as people and individuals in our communities is because we had to do it alone. And community is so important, especially for like the social climate that we're in now. And I think a lot of it has to do with how our communities have changed and how we view how we actually heal, right? So we look at issues as like an individualistic thing, like what that's happening to them over there. And just talking to people who in different generations, my grandmother, even my mom, things were dealt with different in previous years, and family issues. People would literally come together and huddle around when someone was going through something. And that's just not how it's done anymore. So it is a complex question. I think it's a fantastic question. I think it actually starts with the people like myself, also realizing that belong to these groups. Like I said, I'm an auntie, I'm a godmother, but I don't have any of my own yet. So it's realizing that sometimes, parents are ashamed or feel guilty for asking for help or reaching out to people, and sometimes can be in their own headspace about what help looks like and how they're going to get the help. So it's offering, it's showing up. Sometimes it's just being present. And we all have our own lives going on, but it's the importance of realizing that like community is more than ever like critical right now for people. But like that's such a good question. Like how do you, because as adults too, also we have this thing about like we can't form new connections or relationships. Like the people that we know now are going to be the people that we know for the rest of our lives, and that's simply not true. So it takes a shift. It takes a shift. It takes a people taking accountability for the people in the groups that they belong to, and realizing that we can't do this, like we're social beings, like Miss Hassel, we can't do it alone. It would be insane to think that we can. So it's like complex. It's like can be answered at different levels.
Yeah.
It's such a good question.
I
Yeah.
also think it's about changing the narrative and how we define
Yeah.
it. So rather than perceiving asking for help as a weakness, looking at it as a strength, because
Yes.
you have recognized that you're in a moment of need, and so you're asking for that support.
Yeah.
So I think it's also changing the narrative and how we define certain behavior.
Yes. Yes.
It also, it doesn't help if um, someone, a parent, finds themselves having behaved in a way or sent messages in a way that really put them at arm's length from people, because Bermuda is quite small.
Mm.
Sometimes we can find out. I've seen clients who have said, I'm sure I burnt my bridges here, and I can't. And I, it requires, when we are in this particular piece in people's lives, this is the time when we need to walk very softly. We're going to make the difference on whether or not people can forgive themselves,
Mm.
right? So that they can reconnect, so that others can be willing to throw out the trust line again. Um, it's a very tender time
Yeah.
when we're walking in people's lives, when we're asking these sensitive questions about, why is there no one there? Help me understand.
Mm.
Not the why because it's accusing, but the why to help them to give me more information. Right? But it's a very tender, and you can see we're all laboring over it quite carefully and quite sensitively, because we know who the listening audience can be. And we don't want to use this program to alienate anybody, but to encourage them, to motivate them, to inspire them. Maybe one of our faces will make the difference and they'll talk.
Yeah.
And even if it's not people that they have in their personal circle, or like
Yes.
they have different things that they're going through. So it might be family or having to reconnect or forgiveness or all of these things.
Yeah.
And all of this take time, right? So
That's,
what I want to share is like in the immediate stance, if you don't have anyone that's immediately around, we have like community centers. So they have different programming. Like you said, it's teachers at school. So there are people that are in and available to say, hey, I feel like my child needs to socialize more. Or I know like the community centers, the Eastern, Central, and Western one, they have like parents' night out or different clubs and groups that you can go to. And if you have a conversation with them and say, hey, like maybe I need a moment of self care, can my child be here? Or I maybe take a walk to get some fresh air. Or, places like the Family Center or DCFS or all of these different resources
Mm-hmm.
that are around that can assist almost immediately. So even if it's just a place where you can kind of go relax or ask questions, looking at different resources that are out there, like that website that you shared earlier. um, because when you feel alone, sometimes it's a hard task to even think about kind of like reuniting with people, but you
Yep.
still need that support and sometimes the
Yep.
children. So don't be afraid to, like you said, to ask and even shift that narrative of what
Yeah.
help and support looks like. Right now, we have the Child Development Program, which falls on the Ministry of Education. They are doing like a 5-week fatherhood series. And so, like every Tuesday of the month, they've been speaking to fathers of children birth to 5. That's also a resource for mothers and fathers if you needed support. But one of the coordinator had shared last week that two of the fathers actually came together and had a play date, like outside of these sessions. They had
Amazing.
didn't know each other, didn't have any connections to each other, and it's like those small, impactful moves to being a part of spaces and not, like you said, alienating yourself. So you might not feel like, okay, do I go to this fun group or this parenting group, or but put yourself out there because people do want to help and meet us small. So even if it's like you said,
Yeah.
walking on the street asking somebody how are they, like be prepared for a real answer, or even to probe a little bit, like no, like really, how are you? So thank you for that. Before we end, I just want to ask two questions around like emotional well-being. How important would you say that it is for parents to understand and validate their children's emotions? Yeah, that's a big one.
So important. It's essential. I was having a conversation with another professional who works with children, Chardonnay Rollins, you guys probably know her, and
Yeah.
we were talking about how children don't have the language to speak to their emotional states. And when we talk about self care and explaining to children what self care is, working with them around that, something as simple as asking them how that felt, um, giving them the language to describe what they're feeling. How did that feel when this person did this to you at school? This builds emotional intelligence. This builds resilience. um, it builds the ability to be able to articulate and process your emotions when you're able to share with another adult what that experience was like. And then when you have the language as children, you have the language as adults. So not only will we, you know, building emotionally healthy children, but we're creating healthy adults who are going to go into spaces and the relationships because they had the language as children to describe their internal state. So and this is why it's important for parents to have these tools as well. um, and sometimes I often sit with that, like, wow, like what would my experience, how my experiences would have been different if I had the language to speak to how this affected me, right? And how I carried that into different spaces, as someone in high school or even as an adult now. And I think, children, well, not I think, research tells us, like, this is research. Children will adapt to the environments that they are in, right? And it can be maladaptive or it can be a positive way, right? A positive thing. They'll grow in the spaces that they're in. Um, and this can be securely or insecurely. So we have to be able to give children the space to discuss their emotional state. Not just for, they have the ability to go to school and practice physical education and learn about how the body works and why it's important so we don't develop diabetes and cancer and high blood pressure. But what are the conversations we're having to describe how we build resilience, how we handle stress as young people or adults when you grow into an adult, how you work through when you're angry, learning the fact that anger is a healthy emotion, like every human being. There's this full spectrum of emotions that exist, and the positive ones are not the only important ones. You will have some experiences that will beat you down in this life, but how do you manage that? How do you talk about that in your relationships? So giving children the language to describe their feelings, their thinking, giving them the space, creating the safe space for that is it's so important. It's so important. Yeah.
Dayla, I think one of the ways that I see it with children, and one of the things I always want parents to realize,
Mm-hmm.
I see it quite often. I think sometimes parents don't also realize that children are different.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we do, I call it sometimes cookie cutter methods with parents. We meet a child, and because this child can do it this way, we think all children should do it this way.
Yeah.
So one of the things I've noticed I've had to do with some children, even children who have language, but let's talk about trauma. And then all of a sudden they can't speak because of the trauma. I have found that sometimes we have to use visual tools. So the kids will come here and they love, I have a chart that has the face and what the word is. Because a
Yes.
lot of times we don't give kids the word. And sometimes kids will say, "Is that look right there?" And I say, "Oh, well, that word means disgust." And then you
Right.
help them because a lot of times we don't realize, even if you have language or you don't, I may be in a period of my life where I need you to do, like you said, the words for me. So I find that's very helpful. I even tell
Mm.
parents, go and get, it's a thing on there, and I can give you the website, but it's called the Wheel of Emotions.
Yes.
It will show you what's the root of it. Like, so you might have anger as the main root, and then it'll have other words going off. So anger can also create sadness. So it breaks it down for children. They can say, oh, that's why my anger, I feel like this sometimes, or I feel tense.
Yes.
So I think that, and I'm an advocate for this because I feel like, and it's just my personal thing. I meet so many children who may have learning disabilities. They may have different things going on, and sometimes their voice is not heard because not because I can't or I'm not successful. I just don't know how to tell you how I want to do it. And I
Yeah.
think we have to think of this I call them I think we call them nonverbal communication. It's
Mm-hmm.
powerful, parents.
Mm-hmm.
It's powerful. You could be in a room with a child and see them smiling, but their nonverbal body language is telling you something else. So I think parents, we need to help parents learn that too. Like, read your child. You know your child. Sometimes better than experts. I'm gonna put it out there. You know your child, and you can say they look happy, but they're not been eating,
Yes.
or they're not been sleeping, but they're smiling. Those two things don't match. So I think that's a good way to. I like what you said. Language is so important, but remembering
Mm-hmm.
that language comes in so many stages for children
Yes.
and for adults too. Because there are
Yes.
adults that come here. I pull out the little chart. How
That's
you
right.
feel today? Because they
That's
can't tell
right.
me
That's
sometimes.
right.
Yep.
That's
So
right.
that's it. That picture right there. Okay, now I know that you're feeling disgusted or
Yep.
frustrated. So that's my take on like how we can help with the emotion and help parents to learn it and children to learn it.
I think several important topics have been touched in terms of creating a safe space, letting children know that there's no bad emotion, right? So
Yes.
anger is not a bad emotion; it's a very healthy and helpful emotion, right? If you're not expressing anger, how do we know that something has angered you or
Yeah.
upset you? It's a way of communicating,
Yes.
but you just teach a child how to work through that anger, right? What the behaviors look like with that. I think for me, creating a safe space is key. And within creating that safe space is listening to the child to understand, not to rebuttal, right? Don't listen just to speak back to the child. Listen to really understand what he or she is saying to you.
Mm.
Being without judgment of that child's feelings. A lot of times as adults, we can definitely push aside children's feelings because they're children, they don't really know what they feel. They don't know what they're talking about, but they do. And so some children have the verbal language. Some of it is shown through the physical, the body. And like Dr. Z said, you can show visual images and sometimes asking, do you feel angry? Do you feel sad? Are you hurt? Like you can actually ask these questions if a child is having a hard time with finding the words to help them to build their emotional language. And so, really, just being without judgment and holding that space for that child and saying it's okay that you feel the way that you do. You know, I hate when a person says to a child or adult or anyone, "Oh, somebody else is dealing with something worse than you are." That very well may be true, but what this child is dealing with is important to this
Right.
child, right? And it's impacting him or her in a way that they're having a hard time dealing with.
Yep.
So really being nurturing to that child and creating a space for disclosure so they can trust you, right? This is how children build trust.
Yes.
And so just really creating, again, a safe space that I'll keep repeating because that's really important for children to feel as though they can share with you how they're feeling. Because when we share feelings, we're sharing our most vulnerable self. And so as adults, we know that. And so to teach children this is quite important at a young age, I think.
Um, I'm going to make three quick points. One is I want parents, and I said this the last time I was on, parents, uh, you are your child's first sitcom. They are watching you just like you watch CSI or FBI or whatever you're watching. But they are watching and studying you. Please know that. Please know that. And they're doing it 24/7. Watching you doesn't require plugging in electricity. It just requires them to be in your space. And so if your children are in your space, and I don't mean in your face, I mean in your space, how that you share, right? They're picking up everything. So I want to say that. And then the second point that I want to make is safety. Thank you, Shadrina. Safety. Because we're trying to validate the internal self's workings. And parents, if
Yes.
you think that's a mouthful, watch the little movie
Inside,
Inside Out.
inside out.
Inside out, yeah.
Inside Out. If you want to know what validating the internal self of your child or yourself or any human being that you have relationship with, watch that movie,
Mhm.
and it will help you to probably refresh your thoughts on your child trying to tell you how they feel.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Those times they're demonstrating it,
Mhm.
right? And I just want to make this point also. When you have a toddler who's tantruming often, get them in the car, go to the beach. One year I had someone going to the beach. It was cool, it wasn't warm. And I had them write Hallmark cards in the sand. It's a female, but she's just above toddler age, but still tantruming, right? And so we talked a lot about what Hallmark cards are, what they're about, what messages they send. But I try to get the parent to do that with the child when they are to the top of the parent's frustration level. Jump in the car, go find some sand, or if you got a sandy backyard, do it in the backyard. Just pull up Hallmark cards and one that fits, just use it.
Yeah.
Very easy, it's very simple, but you would be validating why they are having those big emotions,
Mhm.
right? You're responding to them, but you don't always have to respond with words.
Mhm.
You don't have to set yourself up to have a power struggle,
Mhm.
right? That's the second point. The third point is this, parents. Man, you're so resilient, you don't even know it because you're not tapping into it.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're ready for the stuff that we're talking about. I want you to know that. You have a level of resiliency in you.
Mhm.
What I would encourage you to practice is don't forget to bounce back and roll forward.
Mhm.
That's the resilience.
Mhm.
Okay? But you got it, parents. I'm serious, you got it. If you need someone like ours to just help you catch on and latch on to it again, no problem.
Mhm. Mhm.
No
You already
problem.
got
But
it.
you got it. You just need to just dust it off, polish it up, bounce back, and roll forward.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes,
I like
absolutely.
that. I almost don't want to end the panel discussion, like we can be here all day. But I do want to thank you for your time because it was so much powerful information shared
Yes.
Mm.
today. And I just want to give each of you the opportunity if you would like to give us, our parents and family some closing words around personal care and value. So I will start with, okay, go on this journey. Maybe you, Shadrina, and then Dr. Zena. You do Dayla and then Miss Brooks.
Okay.
Okay, let me get that started.
I would like to, as I told you guys earlier, I like affirmations. So I'm gonna give something that I do for myself. Whenever I'm telling myself a story in my own head, as a parent, as a worker, or anything, one way I help myself to remind myself that I need to be non-judgmental, humble myself, be grateful. I tell the story, and it's not my thing I created. It's somebody else's, but I just took it. I remind myself, I tell the story, and I then, and especially say if I was talking about Dela, or Dela's this type of parent, boom, 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 and then I end it like this, just like me. And just like me reminds me,
Hmm.
so does me. It could be me. So I'm going to humble myself, be grateful as a parent, as a worker, as a someone in this community, as a social being. I'm going to humble myself because I'm a human being, and it could be me. So that's the reason why I want to give the parents that I do. That's my affirmations. I'm always doing affirmations, just things to tell myself. I honestly have a lot of self talk with myself.
Mm.
We have to. The world keeps pretty distracted, but
I
somehow
tell
we
people
keep
you
it
always say
balanced. We
you
gotta
got
get
talking to
in.
yourself, and I say, don't worry. If I answer
When a
myself,
staff meeting, when a staff meeting.
if I answer myself, most likely someone else is gonna say just right or that. But just remember this quote: just like me. That's how I'll end it.
Just like
My advice to parents would be um, is to be gentle and kind with yourself. You know,
Yes.
mistakes will happen, and that's
Yes.
okay. It's a part of life. And know that your children will love you regardless, whether you're perfect or imperfect in your parenting. So know that you can parent, you can do it. If you need help, there are people out here. We have
Yes.
agencies who are willing to be at your back and call when you need us.
Yeah.
And just really just know that you're the way that you're supposed to be at this time. You're who your child needs. And just really trust yourself. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. I think parenting it's such a sacred role, and I can say that because I have like amazing people in my life who are doing just that now. Like they're amazing parents, and I see the ends that they go to make sure that their kids aren't having the experiences in a lot of ways that they didn't have. So what I would like to say to any parents watching today is to again give yourself the permission to shift at any point. And that's shifting into a new understanding of myself, meeting my own needs so that I can pour into the needs of everyone else around me. And then also if I need to reparent the things that I've been taught about parenting from my parents, right? Because sometimes what we find is that the tools that we were given by the people that raised us were the best that they could do in that moment. And sometimes that isn't our truth in this present day and with all the resources and information that we have available. So give yourself permission to shift, to see yourself, to meet your own needs, and then reparent yourself so that you can then create spaces for your children and your families, even if it doesn't match what your experience as a kid looked like in your home. And again, you belong to you first. So and the kids are dependent on you. They need you, right? They're dependent on you to for survival, right? Like that's what they need you for. But you belong to you first, and then you need to treat it as such, without any shame, without any guilt. And I hope that today has been a learning experience in that way. Like they've given you the information in a way that feels safe for you too. So yeah.
Thank you. And Miss
a
Brooks.
couple of things. First, for parents who have school age boys, preschool and school age boys, go to boystown.com. A lot of stuff on there that you lots. Okay, so for those of you who have children 4 and under, um, Oh my gracious, it just went straight from me. Go to oh, Gran, help me. You're not here. Come on, Zena. We use it at CDP.
Oh, one, two,
Oh,
three. Get to my 1, 2, 3 magic.
it's a site. 0 to 3,
Oh, oh, oh.
0 to 3,
Zero,
0 to 3,
what?
0 to 3.
0 to 3 or something like that. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. If you're looking for any assistance as a parent,
Mm-hmm.
right? Boys on, and it's not that I don't have something for the girls, you know. It's not that I don't have something for the girls.
I put
It's
the
that I'm
link
going to give
to
you
zero
guys
to
more
three.
girls' homework. Go find it. But Boys Town, their information can work for both.
Mm-hmm.
It's just directed at boys, but it can work for both because
Mm-hmm.
the emotion itself is the emotional self.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can work for both.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing I want to say is, look, you lot listening, you had some bright people on here today. I'm glad they let me in. to take their advice because these bright sparks know what they're talking about. I'm your
Bless you, bless
grandmother,
you.
waxing eloquently. So thank you for having me. I
Yes.
hope you really prioritize yourself, parents, and
Yes.
put yourself in your own calendar.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am.
Amen.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you again for joining us. There has been so much information shared. So, for the parents that have watched, I hope that you're able to absorb some of it. If not, feel free to break this video up and our previous videos in, small digestible chunks. So, if it's that 5 minutes of self care at your desk, that
Yeah.
you can watch it. If it's in the bathroom and you're hiding from your children, we get it. We get it. Just go ahead and use the information and share it. So, even if you're a family friend, auntie, uncle, godparent, be sure to support our parents and support the families, right? Our next discussion is going to be next week, Thursday, which is the 24th of November at 12:30. We'll discuss nutrition and meal planning. But we're looking forward to continuing this series. I know the minister has announced that the Parenting Expo will be annual. Who knows? We might have some more topics to discuss. We might have some more panel discussions because there's been so much shared. But thank you, Bermuda, for tuning in. We're going to go for now. But go ahead and share this video with somebody that you know that could use it. Thanks, ladies. Have a good
Thank
one.
Thank you.
you.
Good
Bye.
Bye.
afternoon. Bye.